Hello and welcome to the Cardboard Crash Course. My name's Ethan, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Naalu Collective. This comes from the base game of Twilight Imperium 4th edition, and it's upgraded through the Prophecy of Kings expansion, as well as the Codex found online. As far as printing the Codex, I'll give you a link in the description, and you can go ahead and upgrade your game using that. But we're going to take a look at all of their abilities and the way they integrate into the game, and have a little discussion on how I think you should play them in your own game. Before we do that, I would like to ask you, if you aren't subscribed to the channel and like these videos, go ahead and subscribe. We're trying to hit 1,000 subscribers, and I really am proud of everything we've done so far. We've just got a little bit to go. I also do have a Patreon if you want to help out just a little bit more than that, where you can pick upcoming videos and have Discord benefits and merch sent straight to your door. Without further ado, let's check out the Naalu Collective. Here to start off, we have the Naalu Collective's faction sheet. This is a serpentine matriarchal race of great power that showed itself in the middle of the Twilight Wars. They have a specific connection to the Isarl tribes, and the two races help each other out in growing in secrecy. The Naalu Collective always know what their opponents are going to do before they do it, and are able to react using just the power of their opponents' minds. The Naalu Collective are a very scary race, and they can really overtake a game if played correctly, but they are a little bit difficult to play. That being said, let's go ahead and check out what they start with. First of all, they start with a 2-planet home system called Maluk Drua. Maluk is a 0-resource 2-influence planet, and Drua is a 3-resource 1-influence planet. This makes for a nice 3-3 right off the bat, and 2 planets isn't too bad, though I'd prefer it to be 1. They also start off with some units, namely a carrier, a cruiser, a destroyer, 3 fighters, 4 infantry, a space dock, and a PDS. This really isn't too bad of a start, and it has a nice collection of different types of ships in order to take out the enemy, and 4 infantry is really nice to have. The only thing that I see is just the 1 carrier to bring your infantry around, but as you'll see with some of the Codex updates, which again I'll leave a link to in the description, they do have that pretty much under control. So let's go ahead and check out their starting technology as well. The first one is Sarween Tools. This is a base game technology with no cost and a yellow prerequisite that says, when 1 or more of your units use production, reduce the combined cost of the produced units by 1. So starting with this throughout the whole game really allows you to have a boost to your production from the very beginning. Next up, we have Neural Motivator. This is a pretty simple card that says, during the status phase, draw 2 action cards instead of 1. This is kind of a hint to their Isarl brethren, and really gives them a boost from the beginning, although it is a little bit random. Not a bad start at all, but I'm about to tell you about their most powerful ability, and that's right on their faction sheet, alongside 3 commodities, which isn't too bad, especially for being kind of a villainous race. They also have the ability Telepathic. This says, at the end of the strategy phase, place the Naalu 0 token on your strategy card. You are first in initiative order. And here is that token right here. The 0 token is placed over the strategy card itself, and is probably their most powerful ability, even how simple it is. This allows you to score objectives right away before anybody goes, and also allows you to move first. Now, this can be a little bit bad for stalling, but we'll talk about how beneficial this is during the discussion part. Next up, they also have a very powerful ability called Foresight. This says, after another player moves ships into a system that contains 1 or more of your ships, you may place 1 token from your strategy pool in an adjacent system that does not contain another player's ships. Move your ships from the active system into that system. So basically what this means is this is a retreat that happens before the battle even begins, and this doesn't have a cap to it. So you can just keep retreating over and over as long as you have the command tokens to pay for it. This is really, really powerful and allows them some great defensive capabilities. Next up, I think it's important to talk about their flagship. This is the Matriarch. It's an 8-cost, 9x2 combat, 1 movement, and 6 capacity flagship. Not bad at all, especially that capacity value. It has sustained damage, of course, but really what you're getting out of it is this ability. During an invasion in this system, you may commit fighters to planets as if they were ground forces. When combat ends, return those units to the space area. As you'll notice, they kind of have a mini theme of upgraded fighters, and we'll talk about those in a second. The Matriarch really benefits off of that theme, and this is kind of the opposite of the Necro ability. Still really great. Next up for faction-specific units, we have the Mech, the Iconoclast. This is the first of the cards that's been upgraded with the Codex. This says, other players cannot use anti-fighter barrage against units in this system. It also has sustained damage, cost of 2, and combat value of 6. Now, this is kind of a anti-Argent Flight ability, but really all factions love to use anti-fighter barrage. And this doesn't just happen when the mechs are on the ground. This also happens when the Matriarch or any other unit with capacity is carrying the mechs. This really allows for more defenses, even if you have not used your Foresight ability. Moving on to the last faction-specific unit, we have the Hybrid Crystal Fighter. This is your normal cost of getting 2 fighters for 1, but it has an 8 combat value. This is not amazing, and it can't move on its own quite yet, but as you'll see, it can upgrade. You do start with 3 of them as well. An upgraded fighter is always great because of how many dice they roll. If you create a lot of them, especially with the Matriarch, you can cause some real havoc. And one-on-one with anybody else's fighters, they're going to normally take them out. But let's check on the upgraded version, Hybrid Crystal Fighter 2. The combat value moves to 7 instead of 8, and it has a movement value of 2, which means it can move on its own. The unit may move without being transported. Each fighter in excess of your ship's capacity counts as 1/2 of a ship against your fleet pool. So you can have them move all on their own, and they have an upgraded combat value as opposed to most fighters. This is a terrifying force, and it's not just militaristically powerful, but also powerful in scoring objectives, especially placement-based ones. It's really a cheap way to get your units out there. As for the other faction-specific technology, we have Neuroglaive. This is crazy powerful, although it is expensive. It has 3 green prerequisites that you have to meet, and it says, after another player activates a system that contains 1 or more of your ships, that player removes 1 token from their fleet pool and returns it to their reinforcements. Man, their defenses are crazy in a really aggressive way. They can destroy other people's fleet pool just by them trying to come near you. And if they do come near you, then you still escape. Next up is their exciting leaders. The first one is Zeu. This is, of course, from the Codex as well. It is the Agent of Nephesh. It starts unlocked and has an exhaustible ability that says, exhaust this card and choose a player. That player may perform a tactical action in a non-home system without placing a command token. This system still counts as being activated. Holy cow! This is a free warfare that only they can use. Of course you can give it to somebody else, but I think that it's the most powerful when used on your own, and I don't think any person at the table is going to get very upset that you're doing so. That is a great upgrade. Next up, it just keeps getting better with the commander. This is Mabon, the Crystalline Sorceress. You have to unlock it by having ground forces in or adjacent to the Mechatol Rex system. Kind of incentive to get into the fight, but when you do, you have the passive ability that says, at any time, you may look at your neighbor's hands of promissory notes and the top and bottom card of the agenda deck. This is just telepathic abilities to the extreme. The anytime ability might get annoying at your table, but I suggest you write down everything so that you don't constantly have to keep asking what everyone has. And that pairs perfectly with the hero. This is an old hero, but it's given new life with that new commander. This is the Oracle. You have to unlock it by having 3 scored objectives, just like any other hero, but when you do, it gives you the ability See Radium Geometry. At the end of the status phase, you may force each other player to give you 1 promissory note from their hand. If you do, purge this card. That, of course, is their choice, but because you're going to know what's in everybody's hands, you get to see exactly the most powerful moment to do it. That's not the craziest hero, but I don't think they really needed one. This is probably one of the most powerful factions, even without that ability. And last up is their promissory note, the Gift of Prescience. This says, at the end of the strategy phase, place this card face up in your play area and place the Naalu 0 token on your strategy card. You are first in initiative order. The Naalu player cannot use his telepathic faction ability during this game round. Then return this card to the Naalu player at the end of the status phase. I will say one thing about that. Don't give it away. I'll explain later in the discussion. I would just keep that in your hand no matter what. So, that's the Naalu. Let's go ahead and move on to the discussion. If you haven't already subscribed, go ahead and hit that little subscribe button down there, and why not ring the bell to see new updates? Without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about them. Okay, so what do I think about the Naalu? And, well, my question is, how much can I gush over them? I love the Naalu, and I didn't used to, and that's for a very specific reason. They had not that great of a start in the base game. They had 1 carrier and 4 infantry, which was nice, especially if you got that 2 planet right next to your home system. But with the expansion, the Prophecy of Kings expansion, they're a whole new race. And with the Codex, they almost have no weaknesses. Let me explain. The Prophecy of Kings expansion added 3 planet systems. Of course, this isn't going to come up too often, but having a 3-planet home system that you can immediately explore all 3 planets at once with is very powerful, and don't underestimate that. Starting your expanse is exponential, and the earlier you do it, the better it is, especially for the Naalu. Now, that glaring weakness of only 1 carrier, which we like to call 2C 4I, 2 carriers, 4 infantry, was your best way of starting, and only a few factions had it. But the Naalu just got that fixed. The agent can allow you to do a free warfare every round, and I would suggest never giving this to anybody else, unless they're really paying you enough. Although they can't move 2 separate carriers out, they can move 1 carrier 2 systems out, which means you can drop off 2 infantry and then drop off 2 infantry again. And because they have the foresight ability and many other mind-reading abilities, they don't actually care that much about getting into enemy territory, which is kind of funny because the Naalu and the Asarl are supposed to have deep connections in the lore. So the fact that they have deep connections in their mechanics is a fun way of tying them in. They have 1 glaring weakness, I would say, now, and that is they don't have a promissory note. What I mean by that is you will lose the game if you give this away. The Gift of Prescience, the only reason anybody may want it is because they're going to win off of it. This is very similar to the original Winu promissory note before it was updated. And I believe that the reason why it wasn't updated is because everything else is so powerful that the Naalu shouldn't give away abilities in order to win. They should keep it all to themselves. And they really don't have a reason not to keep it all to themselves. I don't mean be mean. I mean be confident. That 0 token may be the most powerful ability in this entire game. The Naalu 0 token will win you games because when it comes down to it, a lot of games that I've played is the very last status phase determines the winner. And the initiative order is such an important factor when it comes to that. The 0 token in this instance will always let you score first. And there's no detriment to going first in terms of scoring. There is a detriment, however, in going first in terms of the action phase every time. But their agent is also a new stall, so that benefits them even more. I don't know if this was intentional by the Codex, but the fact that they have that stall boosts them just that much more, especially in that first round where you get to see where people are expanding, and towards the very end, you can stall to your heart's content with them. Their start with the 2 planets is not too bad. 3 and 3 is not awful, but it's not wonderful. The fact that it's split between 2 different ones is kind of unfortunate, being 2 and 1 influence, because you have to use all 3 of those and not your resources at all when you're getting command tokens. But that's okay, Because like I said, their start is great in terms of plastic at this point, and the technologies that they start with are actually pretty funny. Let me explain that. Sarween tools I think is unnecessary at this point for them, but just helps them out so much. Decreasing the cost by 1 for everything is so powerful because you can make dreadnoughts right off the bat with what they have. Not only that, but now you can get a free 2 hybrid crystal fighters every round. Sarween tools is just beneficial in every way, and there's no reason not to have it. If they only started out with Neural Motivator, they still would be great. Neural Motivator is where it gets really funny. They have no reason to pick up the politics card. The only reason they would have to pick it up would be to get those 2 action cards. Moving the speaker around can be helpful, however, it's not really that powerful in comparison to giving it to yourself. And they don't have a reason to give it to themselves because they go first every round anyway. The speaker token does get to choose their strategy card, but the Naalu only really need this when they're grabbing things towards the end of the game, including cards such as Imperial. They are a good Mechatol Rex race, but I don't think they should always focus on that. The grabbing 2 action cards, looping back around to Neural Motivator though, is just kind of fixed with that. You get 2 action cards instead of 1 at the end of every round, and you also get promissory notes out of people's hands with your hero. Now their hero isn't too powerful, but I do consider it an ability that is a mid-game boost and kind of equivalent to a couple action cards worth of power. Now the last couple of things that I don't think I've talked about is Foresight and Neuroglaive. Neuroglaive is pretty difficult to get to, but because the hybrid crystal fighters include a green and a blue, I think you should stay away from yellow and just allow Sarween tools to sit there and start going into the blue, especially going from Dark Energy Tap into Gravity Drive. Gravity Drive allows you to get really far out there, and Dark Energy Tap is beneficial because with this Codex, there's also so much more of a drive to expand into empty space. And with their hybrid crystal fighters, they really are allowed to score objectives that include localization and expanse. Moving into Gravity Drive and then getting your hybrid crystal fighter 2, and then moving into Neuroglaive, just allows you this nice sort of systematic pattern of going about things. So stay in that green and blue territory as much as you can. This also is beneficial because they'll have to grab tech often. And because they have to grab tech a lot, their 0 token allows them to still go first from it. Technology has a real detriment in mid-game because you're going last all the time, and people have already sort of gotten all the technologies they want. But these guys really want to tech out into Neuroglaive, even if it's one of the last things they're doing, because that defensive matrix that they create and allowing themselves to shut people down, especially with their fleet pool, is so powerful in late game, you really cannot put a price to it. So what do I think is their overall strategy? Well, grab leadership, especially in the early game, build up those command counters, and move out into systems that are far away from you. Get a little bit of information out of everybody's hands, especially with that commander, and try to make friends. Now, experienced players may not make friends with the Naalu, but it's kind of in their role to try to make friends and be conniving with the new players. I know, don't make it terrible for them, but show them what a powerful faction can look like. They'll be excited to play it, I promise you. Every time I've explained Naalu to one of my friends, you know who you are, they've wanted to play them every single game. Especially with these upgrades, they're so much fun, and having a powerful faction isn't necessarily a bad thing. So moving from leadership early into technology mid-game, and only using politics and warfare when you absolutely need it, is really going to just win you the game easier. Now you still have to really play them because they don't have a lot of militaristic or political power, but they do have a lot of personal gain that they get from all of their cards. Go into the game thinking you're a lone wolf, and if you make any friends, then that's just a benefit for you. But you can really do this all your own, I promise you. So what do I think the Codex did for them? I think it sort of rounded out those jagged edges that the Naalu had. And the 0 token, well, if they make a 5th edition to Twilight Imperium, I almost think it might not come along, because it's so glaringly powerful. Anything that they try to balance or do little bits of buffing to the Naalu just takes a super well-rounded faction and shaves off a tiny bit of damage around the edges. So that's what I think about the Naalu. If you dislike them or have any comments or criticism about what I said, I would love for you to leave that down below. If you want to choose the next faction that I discuss, there's a lot of benefits that you can get out of being a patron for the channel. Thank you so much for joining me in the Cardboard Crash Course, and I will see you next time. Pax Magnifica, Bellum Gloriosum.